If you chose pile number one, this is your reading. This is how you are currently being perceived by others around you. So, with this energy, how you're currently being perceived, you're being perceived as someone who might have tunnel vision in some areas of your life, that you are someone who's very private. You're someone who you take a lot of precaution, and at times you may need solitude. You may need to withdraw your energy and shut people out because you feel like a lot of people have too many opinions about you. There's this energy here that you are being perceived as someone who, in some ways, can kind of self sabotage with this Eight of Cups and this Nine of Cups. You may, in some ways, self sabotage things that others may see as being desirable or a wish fulfillment. An opportunity that is presented to you may not be as appealing to you as it may be to others, or in some way, people are perceiving you as someone who, in some way, walks away from things that you were wishing or hoping for. There's this energy here that people perceive you in some way as being in this energy of being very cautious of who is around you at this time. With the Seven of Swords and this Queen of Pentacles, how you're being perceived, there are people in your energy around you, in your environment, who question how you make your money. They're perceiving you as maybe being sneaky or having some sort of secret about how you make your money, how you manifest, how you bring abundance in. People perceive you as being very calculated in how you create, how you, again, going back to this Queen of Pentacles, how you bring in your material world, how you create money, how you make money. There's a lot of perception around you having some sort of secret to success or secret business, secret lifestyle, secret side hustle, even that people are wondering how you do this. With the World and the Six of Pentacles, you're being perceived as someone who is also very balanced, though. There's this message with this pile. You're being perceived as someone who has an alter ego, that there are two sides to you, that you're very balanced, that you have a very light and loving side, but you have an equally as dark and tapped into your shadow. There's this energy here that you're extremely intuitive too with this High Priestess. You're being perceived as someone who takes their time as well with the Seven of Pentacles underneath. If you have an intuitive feeling, you take your time in trying to understand what is happening. You're being perceived as someone who is also very motherly and nurturing. However, with this moon, the fourth house, and Cancer, this is all heavily ruled by Cancer. You're being seen as someone who is very nurturing and very maternal, someone who takes care of others, someone who would give to others before they would give to themselves. If you have children, if you are a mother, you're being seen as a very good mother, someone who takes care of anyone without any question. You would even take care of other people, other people's children. You have a very giving heart, and this is being seen and perceived about you. You're also being seen as someone who has a lot of people who watch them. That you're very cautious, that you're very cautious with who you let in your energy, because you have a lot of people who gossip about you, who keep eyes on you. You're being seen as someone and perceived as someone who people can't quite grasp, that people have a lot of misconceptions about. They may see you as being a snake or feeling like you have bad intentions, again with the Seven of Swords, but they find that you're really friendly and you're harmless. People perceive you as someone who's, again, very cautious because you have been put in situations where you have felt stuck so many times. People perceive you as someone who has had to change directions in life so many times. You've had to start new, you've had to rebuild yourself, you've had to start over. And this is why you kind of keep yourself sheltered from others or your energy. You protect your energy. You're being perceived as someone who stands up for women. You're being perceived as someone who stands up for others in general, people who are either bullied or who are seen as being oppressed in some way. You are being seen and perceived as someone who is an earth angel, someone who helps people, someone, again, with this motherly energy and this earth guardian, this feminism, that you are strongly connected to your feminine energy and to women in general, that you would help a cause if it were to create a change, especially with women. This is strongly connected to your feminine energy. You're being perceived as someone who stands up for women's rights. You're being seen as someone who's very just and balanced, that would stand up for the little person or for someone who's being bullied or mistreated. That you would be the one to speak out about something if something was being done that was negative. When no one else would say something, you would be the one to say something. You're being perceived as someone with this Nine of Swords and this star, that you have had anxiety in the past, but this is something you have healed, that you have worked super hard to heal some sort of anxiety or PTSD, some sort of trauma that you've experienced. You've had to really work on balancing your own emotions, regulating your emotions, and having healthier ways to cope with certain things that have happened in your life. And you're being perceived also as someone who is very connected to nature and animals. You're being seen as someone who is very slow at times to act, but when you do act, you act quickly. Again, with this calculated energy, people perceive you as someone who is 10 steps ahead, but you never show your hand, or you never really give off this energy that you already have things figured out. Again, you give off this energy that you're perhaps more aloof than you really are, or that you have this tunnel vision, but really you know what's going on around you at all times. Pile number two, if you chose thumbnail number two, this is your reading on how people are perceiving you. So, right now, people are perceiving you as someone who has a lot going on, who has a lot on their plate, who might be a little bit overwhelmed or stressed out at this time. People are perceiving you as someone who has had some sort of missed opportunities, things that you've been working on, whether this is most likely in your career or hobbies, things that you have invested a lot of time in learning. There's You're being perceived as someone who has had opportunities kind of taken from you, or you've missed out on certain opportunities that would have been really good for you. With this Four of Pentacles in reverse and this Devil energy, you're being perceived as someone who has let go of a lot of toxic behaviors. You're being seen as someone who has let go of some sort of addiction, some sort of vice, whether this is an actual addiction, whether this is a negative way of thinking. You are being seen as someone who has gotten rid of some sort of bad behavior or tendency. You're being seen and perceived as someone who's extremely hardworking, someone who perhaps is even a workaholic. You are someone who has a lot of goals. People see that you don't let things get in your way, and you are someone who perhaps has a lot of ideas or projects. You're being seen as someone who is very adventurous, who likes to try new things, who has a different way of thinking than most people, that you are open minded and the way you think is expansive with this ninth house, that you're open to higher learning. You're always trying to learn new things. You're being perceived as someone who is always trying to learn, who's always trying to do better, who is always trying to master their craft and get better at what they do. You're being seen as someone who has had to sacrifice a lot in your life, that you've had to take on a lot of weight and burdens that are not yours and that were never yours to carry. You're being seen as someone who has had a lot of faith throughout a lot of difficult and difficult, extremely hard to navigate circumstances in your life. You're being seen as someone who is extremely sure in yourself, that you know what you're doing, and that it's hard to change your mind. You're being seen as someone who has a very strong mind. People might even perceive you as being a genius in some way, or that your intellect is different than the average person. You think in a way that is different than most. People perceive you as being a great communicator, someone who is really clear on who you are and the way you think and the way you articulate what you're trying to express. People perceive you as someone who has, like I said, their mind made up, that it's hard to change your mind. You're very sure of who you are. You know yourself, you know your beliefs and what you stand for, and it's hard to change your beliefs. You're being seen as someone who likes to be in control in certain ways, that you at times like to be away from others or society, that at times you can be a homebody, that you like to be in a place that you can just rest and feel at peace. But there's also this side to you that is extremely adventurous, that you like to try new things, that you're always looking for a thrill or some sort of new experience. You're being seen as someone who has had to sacrifice so much, but now you're finally coming into an area and a season in your life where you're getting the things that you prayed for, the things that you manifested, the time, the blood, sweat, tears, and energy that you put into certain things. You have poured your energy into learning. You've poured your resources into doing certain things, to learning certain things, to advancing in certain areas of your life, to giving up certain vices that were holding you back. And these sacrifices that you made, you're being perceived as someone, it was worth it, because now the changes you made in your life are being seen by others. You're being seen as someone as well who can create something out of nothing. You're being seen as someone at times as well who can be a little bit brash with your words, but it's always because it is truthful. There's a truth to this brashness. And when you communicate how you feel, even though it may be harsh in some ways to some people, you're doing it in a way that is very receptive and clear and respectful. People perceive you as someone who has had to temper their mouth a lot and how they come across with other people. You may be misconstrued or may have had a lot of people misperceive how and what you say certain things. And you're being perceived as someone who really has good intentions, but has been put up against a lot of setbacks. And you're being seen as someone who has had to really start from the bottom in certain areas of your life. You have created the abundance you have. It's not because it was handed to you, it was because of these goals. It was because of your determination and your ability to keep going and to keep sacrificing no matter what, no matter how hard it was. You kept pouring into yourself. You're being perceived as someone who's a safe place as well for others, that you're someone people know they can trust, that they can go to, and that you will not sugarcoat things, but you will give them good advice. And you're someone that others can confide in, that they feel that their secrets and that what they tell you is safe with you, but you're also someone who is going to tell them the truth, and you're not going to beat around the bush. You're someone who's being perceived as having a lot of, with this Page of Wands and this Knight of Wands, a lot of creativity, a lot of creative passions, a lot of ideas, a lot of desire and drive, a lot of energy even. You're being perceived as someone who can just keep going, but you do get burnt out, and you might not show this to a lot of people, And that's your reading pile 2, and I hope that resonates. If you chose pile number 3, this is your reading on how you are being perceived. So, how you're being perceived right now by others, you're being perceived as someone who is extremely resourceful. You're someone who has a lot of connections, or this is how people are perceiving you. Someone who is very organized, someone who has their ducks in a row. You are being seen as someone who is good at networking, who is good at communicating. You're being perceived as someone who is very connected to their family as well, that you have a strong drive for your family, that you have a close bond to either your family or to those that you're very close to, those that are around you, that you have a strong kinship with others. You are being perceived as someone also who is very youthful, no matter your age, that you look really young. You are also being perceived as someone who is different or eccentric, that the way you think or the way you dress, there's something about you, whether that is your physical appearance or how you operate and how you act, that is different from others. You are someone who stands out from the crowd, that your beliefs may be different than others, that you're very strong in what you believe. You're being perceived as someone who thinks outside of the box, who is really good with analyzing certain situations. You're being seen as someone who is also very good with communicating. You're being seen as someone who is a humanitarian, who gives back to others. You're being seen as someone and perceived that you have very strong boundaries, that you have had to put up boundaries in your life, and you've had to forgive a lot of people, including yourself. You're being seen as someone who is very lucky, that things just seem to happen for you. People perceive you as someone who things always work out in your favor no matter what it looks like, even though that is their perception and they don't see exactly perhaps what is going on or all of the work that is put into a certain task or a certain outcome. People see you as just being lucky. People perceive you as being someone who can kind of get in their head sometimes. However, with this Eight of Swords and this Four of Swords, people see you as someone who maybe struggles with mental conflict or being in their head. You may struggle with mental health, but people perceive you as being someone who needs to at times withdraw and take a step back and to decompress, because you do get too wrapped up mentally in certain aspects. People perceive you as someone who has had a lot of having to go within to cleanse and purge, that a lot that has happened with this healing card and this forgiveness and boundaries. People perceive you as someone that no matter what you've gone through, you still look at the bright side of things, that you still try to find the good in a situation. You try to find the lesson, that you're always looking for the silver lining. People perceive you as an optimist. Even though you mentally get in your head at times, you still try to look at things in a way that others don't always look at them. Again, with this trailblazer energy, there's something about you or a specific way you do something that is different than others. People perceive you as being a revolutionary, as being someone who stands out. People perceive you as being extremely smart too, someone who will get to the bottom of something. If they need to know something, that you will figure out on your own what you need to know. You don't rely on others to make decisions for you. People perceive you as someone who's always willing to learn, and that you don't look down on learning, that you don't feel like you know everything, but there's always something that you could learn or benefit from. People perceive you as someone who can have a conversation with anyone, that you can get along with anyone, even if it's small talk, that you can find something to talk about with absolutely anybody. People perceive you as someone who's not afraid to express yourself freely. With this Aquarius energy, this free expression, and also this trailblazer energy, you are being perceived as someone who doesn't care what other people think. although we all do to some certain extent, you're being seen as someone who truly does not care if people see you a certain way because you know who you are. People perceive you as someone who dresses however they want. You look however you want. You're not doing things for other people, but for yourself. People perceive you as being extremely attractive. With this King of Wands in the Tower, they perceive you as having extremely strong sexual energy and also energy that is just very assertive. When you walk into a room, you take up a lot of space. People perceive you as being someone who doesn't take too much time in limbo or being indecisive with the Hangman in reverse and the Tower energy here. You're someone, when you make your mind up, you move quickly and you act quickly. You're not someone to sit around and do nothing. People perceive you as being someone who is constantly trying to get to the bottom of things and trying to learn new things, trying to understand why things are the way they are or why people do certain things or why you ask a lot of questions. You're curious. People are perceiving you as someone who is very dedicated to learning and dedicated to doing better for themselves, but in a intellectual sense. People perceive you as being someone who can sustain the others around you. That you have, I'm hearing, enough bandwidth, but you have enough like energy, you have enough resources. There's something that you have more of than those around you that you're able to sustain other people off of. So that's how you're being perceived, and I hope that resonates.